This is Michigan Theater and Film Talk. I am your host, Jeff Tamakis. And for those of you who are tuning into this for the first time, Michigan Theater and Film Talk is an interview show dedicated to highlighting Michigan theater and film professionals from all over the state and highlighting it to anyone from outside of the state who would like to know more about what's happening here in our beautiful state. Before we begin, I do want to say to everyone that they should go to Facebook and like my page, which is Michigan Michael Chekhov Classes -M2C2, and you can be the first to be notified on these videos. Also, you can go to YouTube, which is at Michigan Chekhov, and go ahead and subscribe to that as well. If you're watching this on either platform, please like or subscribe to this right now and share it with everyone you know, you will know, you have known in your entire life. My guest today is Mr. Lynch Travis. Lynch is a well-established theater and film professional who's done many local films, much local theater, is a teacher, is an actor, is a director, and I'm very honored to have you here with me today.
Well, thank you, Jeff, and I'm very pleased to be here. You said long-standing. I don't know what I mean. Yeah, the test of time. Yeah, so I've been around here for a while.
Yeah, I wasn't calling you old.
Well, my kids do that.
So, what brings you to Michigan? Are you from Michigan?
No, I was actually born and raised in Chicago. I ended up going to college in Minnesota, to Carleton College. Ended up working there for a few years. I got transferred here in the mid-'80s. At the time, I wasn't doing any theater. I wasn't doing any acting. I was working for a well-known insurance company selling employee benefit plans.
Okay.
So I moved here and I started, doing that kind of that work. At one point, I had some life changes, some major life shifts, and divorce, that type of thing. And I decided that I wanted to find some activities that would be healthy, that I could meet people, and just kind of expand, my social realm here in Michigan. So my daughter had taken an acting class from a local professional summer camp, and I was like, wow, they really did a nice job in 2 weeks. That was great. And this lady was running a community theater group, the Southfield Community Theater Group, Joyce Uslack. And she sent out a flyer to all the parents, said, hey, we need some help. We need people to be on our board. We need people to help us with sets and so on and so forth. And I was like, I can do that. I can tear down sets. I can't build them, but I can rip them down. So I went to a planning meeting. And like all groups that were started up, they were in desperate need for people and bodies. So I became part of that group. And of course, I don't know how many of us have started in community theater. There's always a need for men to be in roles. So they had a show coming up, and they told me I should audition. So I did, and I got cast in a production that kind of got me started here in Michigan, acting again. I'd done a lot of acting in college.
Okay.
Carleton didn't have a theater department.
Okay.
It didn't have a theater major. Theater was an extracurricular activity, and most of the shows I was in there were student-run productions. Students got funding from a central source, an activity kind of group at the school, and put up shows. And I was really fortunate and blessed to be around a lot of people that knew what the heck they were doing. And a lot of them had gone to prep schools on the East Coast and around, and had been introduced to doing theater. And so we had people that did building, they did sets, they did lights, they did sound, they did props. Most of the shows I was in, I only did one show at Carleton that was directed by a professor. The others were directed by students. It was in the early 70s, that's why I'm aging myself a little bit, mid 70s. And there was a lot of exciting African American theater going on at that time. You started seeing the advent of playwrights coming in after Baraka and that kind of thing, with new works that were highly acclaimed, and we did a lot of those shows.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. So I got in. I started doing technical stuff. Then I auditioned, I got on stage, and I did it for the last 3 years in college. But I was still never thinking of it as a career, never thinking as something that would go beyond it. I had friends that were going to New York and going to LA, that type of thing, and I'm like, what the hell are they talking about, So I took the corporate route. I went to work for Prudential.
Okay.
And I worked for them for like 11 years, and I ended up traveling a lot. I couldn't have done theater if I wanted to initially. I was on the road for 2-3 weeks at a time.
Yeah.
Coming home on Fridays, that type of thing. So for 15 years, I didn't do any theater because of my work obligations and things like that. Started a family, that kind of thing. Like I said, when I had the life change, I was like, oh man, I always loved doing that theater stuff. So let me get involved again. The first show I did was directed by Chris Bremer, who's now the artistic director at Jewish Ensemble Theater. It was his first directing gig.
Oh, wow.
He had just earned his master's at UND Mercy, and we did the show. And for those that are familiar with the Michigan acting scene, his mother is Mary Bremer, and his stepfather is Arthur Beer, who just retired. And they were like iconic in this community in terms of the level of theater and that they were doing. And they came to see a dress rehearsal of The Mouse That Roared. And
this is the show
that was the show I did, yeah. I was the Duke. It was crazy. It was a mixed group of kids and adults. Not a whole lot. I mean, not the greatest show I've ever been in, probably not the worst, but Arthur and Mary saw me. Afterwards, we went out and socialized, and they were like, hey, they were very encouraging. And I was like, oh, okay, I did great. I'm good. This is cool. My plan is working. I'm meeting people. I'm doing something I like. But it wasn't long after that they invited me to do some other projects. Some other folks that were in the community theater group introduced me to other community theater groups. So I did a few community theater shows. And then one day I ran into Mary on the steps of the Royal Oak Post Office. One of those random things. She's coming out, I'm going up. Who knows, right? She stops, she says, hey, Lynch. I say, hey, Mary, how are you doing? She said, look, I just got a call from Meadowbrook. They're looking for somebody to be an understudy and an extra and To Kill a Mockingbird. Are you interested? I'm like, sure, So she said, well, call this guy Terry Carpenter. Everybody in this community
Terry
knows.
Carpenter,
And
great stage manager.
Great stage manager. And at the time, they didn't have an artistic director at Meadowbrook. So he was pretty much calling a lot of the shots. So she said, give him a call, and see what happens. So I called him. He hired me based on Mary's recommendation. I went out there and in less than a year, maybe a year or so after I had done The Mouse That Roared, I was in a Lord B Theater equity show, and I got to understudy 2 roles. And because of the court scene, I was on set every day. I was in the show every day, and I met some great people. I was like, wow, this is really exciting. So I kept going. I got introduced to a couple other theater companies. I eventually auditioned at Plowshares, got cast in a show that did really well, and a few others. So it just kind of happened. Before I knew it, I was doing professional theater. I was still working my corporate job, which I did for the next 20 years. I worked for various HMOs and healthcare entities around Michigan, but I always was able to somehow wrangle my bosses and get them on board so that if I had to take an afternoon off or whatever,
Meadowbrook usually rehearses during the day.
They did. So what happened was, because I was just an extra and an understudy, I didn't get called in until Tech Week. And I talked to my boss, Eleanor Dilligard. I'll never forget her. And she said, look, I'm really in support of people doing what their life dreams are. If you can figure out a way to give me my 40 hours and do what you got to do, whenever you got to do it, that's fine with me. So I sat down and I worked out a schedule. I gave it to her, and she said, okay, this is fine. So I was able to do those student matinees, all that kind of crazy stuff. I would go up there, do the show, come back, go to work for a while. I would come in on Saturdays and Sunday mornings, and do my thing. And actually, for the first time in my professional career, I became super organized and planning, that kind of thing. Because I was just, I realize now that it wasn't something I loved. I was doing well at it, but I didn't love it. I love theater, and I wanted to do the theater thing. So I made a way through that corporate maze, and I was always honest about it. I always told people that this is what I do. I love doing it. I never took like extended vacation, so I used my vacation days if I had to, that type of thing. So it kind of worked out. So I reached a turning point. As many of you guys know, the healthcare industry has really changed, particularly since I started in 1982 or 83 in that segment of it. To the point now where the companies, almost all the companies I work for, no longer exist. Wow. So yeah, I was in a dying industry and didn't know it. So as I went through this thing, I just kept falling more and more in love with theater. I remember going and talking to Art Beer one day and saying, "Hey man, I think I got to do this." And he was like, "You're just going to be one starving poor SOB if you do this." He said, "I feel sorry for these guys. I got my professorship and benefits and all that kind of thing." So I just kept deferring that decision. And a couple of things happened. One of the companies I worked for was sold. So I got a buyout. That gave me some time. It enabled me to do my first show at the Purple Rose, which they rehearsed in the daytime.
Yeah.
And
a lot.
And in those days, almost all the rehearsals were in the daytime. So I was able to do that show, and it did really well. And of course, I met Jeff Daniels and that kind of thing, and I was like, wow, it was really great. So I was kind of like almost there. Then I got a call to go back and do some consulting work, which was great. So I had the flexibility, to do stuff. I started doing some commercials and voiceovers and things like that as well. I mean, it always seemed to work out. And that, like I said, that continued for about 20 years. So jumping up into like 2012 or so, I was working for a company that provided benefits for mentally ill people. I'd risen up to a director level. I had a staff of about 17, 18 people working for me. I was delegating a lot. I was still doing my thing. I was still able to do theater in most places because other theater companies work in the evening. Got to the point where that company went through a really turmoil situation financially and all that. Got back into up on its feet. I actually absorbed more responsibility in that time frame, and we ended up with a new boss. And at first, I thought it was like this dude was from California, and he loved movies, and he was telling me stories about his dad being Bruce Lee's, not Bruce Lee. What's the man down there, the Texan, he's almost a joke now.
Yeah. Oh gosh.
Yeah. See, I'm gonna draw a blank just because I'm trying to think of his name.
We'll put it in.
Yeah. Walker, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he.
It's gonna come to me, and then I'm gonna scream it out.
Yeah.
All right.
And me too. So he was telling me all these stories and this, that, and the other, and that, and I'm like, okay, so this dude is like all in. He came to see a couple of shows, but as that next couple of years kind of evolved, I started seeing that his philosophy about work and things like that were totally different than mine.
Like you have to work.
Yeah, I mean, he was the type of person that if you asked for a week off, he'd be like asking you all kind of questions, even though you had the time. He'd be like, well, is the department going to be okay? Is it, how can you take a week off? You're the manager. You got all these people, da da da. And I'm like, I got good, competent people. They can take care of the thing for a week. So I decided in 2012 that enough was enough. I had become over the years associated with Rick Sperling, who runs Mosaic Youth Theater, and Rick was always trying to reel me in, and that kind of thing. And I said, Rick, if I ever leave corporate again, I am going to teach. I am going to find a way to make this work because I'm not going back. So I got to that impasse, and I decided to leave that job, almost like spur of the moment. Like we had a conversation on Friday, on Monday I resigned.
Yeah.
Well,
I know. When it's done, it's done.
Yeah, and I was in a good situation. Both my kids had finished pretty much. My son had pretty much finished college. My daughter had long gone. She's an attorney, so they were all set. I didn't have to worry directly about their financial well-being anymore. So I took the plunge in 2012. For a while, I thought I might be able to do some healthcare consulting and all of that, but it just wasn't. I wasn't feeling it. People would call me, and I would kind of be listless about getting back to them. And how much?
Can't wait to talk to you about insurance.
Yeah. So for I'm gonna say the next 2 or 3 years, I really struggled. Just getting back on my feet, finding things to do. Then I started piecing things together. Things started coming. All that work paid off. All those relationships, that I had developed over time. And I was able to, certainly with a drastic cut in income, for real.
Yeah.
But I jumped out there in 2012. So that's for the last 7, 8 years. This is what I do.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
'Cause I want to go back to the beginning again,
Okay.
which is, you did you do theater before college or no?
Well, I grew up in the Baptist church in Chicago. Which meant that you were always doing something. And a lot of things, we did these pageants and Christmas stuff and that. So I've been performing for a long time. I was introduced to music. I played drums, I played trumpet, that type of thing. I went to, when I was in 5th grade, they built a new school a block away from our house, George Gershwin Elementary School. So that came with some stuff, the history of George Gershwin, particularly his interaction with the African American community, with writing Porgy and Bess, and legacying that to be something that he created for African American actors and singers. His brother Ira was still living at the time. He heard about this school being named after his brother, and he was very generous in terms of donating equipment and instruments and things like that to our school. And we had a woman, Miss Terrell, who was musically gifted. And every year she put on 2 or 3 of these huge types of shows. Now, you can't really call them plays, but they had scenes. They had people did speeches and things like that. We played a lot of music, so I did that a lot then. So I was exposed to the arts. I always had a great memory. So they had me, reciting this, that, or the other, kind of stuff. So that was my introduction to performing. So I was.
But you were sort of always a kind of a performer,
right? So I was comfortable with it. I like doing it. I'm a big daydreamer, that kind of thing. So it allowed me to, and I was pretty introverted, growing up. I wasn't the most outgoing person. I wasn't the guy that was like always in front, that kind of thing. But so this gave me an opportunity to do that, to be the star for a moment. I learned some great lessons. I had some great teachers. So it was in me. Now, when I went to high school, boy, Jeff, I came that close to being lost totally. I was a great student, but I was in an environment where the thrill of the street and all the stuff that came with going to high school was more attracted to me than classroom. I took care of my business in the class, but after school, man, it was on. I was wild and I was crazy. I grew up in West Inglewood in Chicago, which is now one of the most notorious neighborhoods in the world. And it was getting that way as I was growing up. It always had that edge, but it was, but it was still a very healthy community then. So
do you ever go back? Or?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, my whole family's still in Chicago, pretty much. My mom just died a couple of years ago, but I still go back. So I got out. So in high school, I was into drinking wine, smoking dope, all those things that can just kind of. I didn't have time. I had a job, so I didn't have time for extracurricular activities. We had probably the weakest theater program that you could imagine.
Did you have a theater program?
They did a little bit. They had some students. They had a theater club.
Okay.
And these students would get together and do stuff. So here's how that goes full circle for me. So I'm living in Minneapolis at the time. That's where I work for Prudential. So and I love going to the theater. So my wife and I decided to go see For Colored Girls. It was just touring. It was the first touring of that show. And we go, I think, to the Firehouse Players in St. Paul. And we go and watch the show. And the lady in brown is one of my high school classmates. And I'm like, oh my God, I know her. She used to do the the little civil rights pageants in high school. And here she is, a professional actor in this great production, Mozetta Harris. I'm like, wow.
Was that, would you say that would be the seed?
That was kind of one of those, when you look back, I was like, wow, okay.
That's not unreachable or untouchable
Right, yeah,
for you.
yeah. And one of the things that was going on is that because I was traveling, I was unable to do things in Minneapolis, which is a great city for theater.
Yeah, I lived in Minneapolis for about 5 years, and that is a great town.
Yeah, I had season tickets to the Guthrie, and I saw James Earl Jones and all that good stuff, and I had friends who worked at Penumbra.
Okay.
I would go see their shows, and I had friends that were part of the big singing group, The Sounds of Blackness.
Okay.
And they used to do a Christmas pageant every year. It was a takeoff on the night before Christmas, done from an African American viewpoint, and it was crazy good. I wasn't a singer, so I was like, I can't do that, But it was just kind of exciting to be around that, that kind of thing. So I didn't know that was what was missing in my life, but some of those indications were there when I look back.
So you've mentioned kind of in and around the fact that you felt like something was missing.
Yeah.
And I'm curious about like what that felt like for you, or how that manifested for you.
Well, here's the thing. When I worked at Prudential, I probably did. I worked in about 3 or 4 different departments in 11 years, and all of those jobs had aspects of them that I liked, but none of them that I was crazy about. I was really into sports. I played in Minneapolis. Is a great place to do recreational sports. I did a lot of that. That was the only thing that I felt any passion for. But then, as you realize, hey, in fact, I'd never had any aspirations to play pro ball or anything like that. I knew I wasn't good enough. But I still was like, I'm a smart guy. I'm well educated. Why aren't I feeling like, I need to get up in the morning and go charge and do some of the things that what is it? What am I missing? And I never had the gift of drawing or singing or any of those things. So I wasn't looking in the artistic realm, that kind of thing. At one point, right before I left Prudential, before I left Minneapolis to come here, I was asked to perform. We had a Black History Month thing going on, and it was a poetry thing. And I was asked to recite a poem, that I had known pretty well. And I did it, and I felt like wow, and James Weldon Johnson, and I really felt great performing it. But again, that was like, it was elusive. I still hadn't caught it. So in a lot of ways, particularly when I talk to students, I'm like, there's a lot of ways that you get there, and sometimes you don't even know you're on the path. You don't even know you're on a journey. So when it was all said and done, when I started doing stuff here, start off, okay, I just want to get out of the house. I don't want to be sitting in bars, trying to pick up women or whatever. Let me go do something else. And I started doing the theater thing. And like I said, it was just a flyer, a one-page, come join the Southfield Community Group. I went and did it, and I just found myself.
Wow. It
was right then and there. I was like, this is satisfying that longing that I had. That I'm able to. I'm creating something. I'm meeting interesting people. It helped me, as we know, when you're doing theater and you're studying, you're learning about the show, you're learning about whatever it is that you need to know to kind of develop a character or be part of the ensemble or whatever. All of the history, the literature, the interest that I had in music, not as a musician but as a listener, all those things started coming together. Like, I can apply this. I can apply these business skills that I have. I learned to listen to people. I was, sales. I was doing service, that kind of thing. I learned how to deal with a wide variety of people, that kind of thing. I had gotten quite over my fear of being in strange places and with strange people. I had to.
Well, theater people are the strangest. Let's face it.
Yeah. So this thing it just started really. Hey, I found myself. I'm almost 40, and here I am.
And there you are.
And there I am. Yeah.
Do you have a favorite role? Do you have a moment where you were like, "Oh my gosh, this is the best"?
Yeah, I got a lot of those.
Okay. All right. Well, give me top three. Top three.
Top three. Okay. Well, I just finished a show
Okay.
that Joe Zettelmeyer wrote, local playwright. Being produced all over the world, folks. Michigan guy. Hey.
Yeah.
And in this play, I am playing the father of a young lady who has aspirations, and she makes a very tragic kind of mistake during the course of the play. That role, and I had friends that have known me over the years that said, that part, that guy seemed more like you than anything else I've seen you play. And I had that feeling as well, simply because I have a daughter. I have children, and it was something that I could immediately identify with. The play,
What's the name of the play?
The play is called Channel Cat.
Yeah, and I read that script,
Yeah.
and it is, I think, one of Joe's best scripts. It's really, really good script.
It was a really good script, and one of the things that I was fortunate to do, the woman that played my daughter was a young lady that I directed when I was working at Wayne State.
Okay.
So I was able to work with her, and I think she's tremendously talented, that kind of thing. And I'm like, wanting to see that happen. You know what I mean, for her. And so it was easy to transfer that same kind of feeling that I had for my own child, on stage, that kind of thing. So that role really spoke to me. It also took place in Mississippi, which is my family's ancestral home.
Okay.
That kind of thing. So there was a lot of ties. The guy was a cook. I love cooking. All those types of things.
Do you think it's easier to get into a character that's very similar to you, or how is that different from getting into a character that might be very different?
Yeah. One of the challenges that I had, I played a guy in a play at the Purple Rose a couple years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, who was gay, and I'm not gay, and that bothered me. Just in terms of, I was like, how do I do this justice? How do I
Like giving into stereotype,
right? That type of thing, and of course it was well written and well directed, so I didn't have to, but I had some moments of, I don't want to be up here doing something that is not, I hate to use the word real, truthful. Yes, that's a good word. That is the word, and also at the same time, I wanted to make sure that this guy's story was important. It needed to be told, and he wasn't the lead theme of the show, but it was an important subplot. We had some. That was one of the shows where they did a lot of talkbacks, and the feedback that I got in the talkbacks was great. Just in terms of, there were some people that were from that community that were able to identify and talk about the issues. So at least I got it out there, in terms of. And then I have no idea of the things that they go through internally, psychologically, and all that, in terms of what they living that, that being, part of a segment of society that a lot of people judge, condemn, all those kind of nasty things. And what this issue was about was a lack of parental support, and so. That was also foreign to me as well. Now, I'm not always crazy about the way, particularly my dad parented, but in his own mind, he was being supportive, that kind of thing. So it's always like, I always kind of take a moment when someone tells me that their parents are supportive of them. It always just kind of like, I can imagine that, that scares me. But I was able to do the job. And I think that's part of the training and experience, that we go through. And I was able to bring some things where I had some moments where I was like, man, I wasn't happy with the way my dad dealt with me on that, or my mom, or whoever it might have been, or a teacher or something, So some of those feelings I could relate to. I don't know if I could necessarily say that it was the same thing, but I could use it.
Okay.
We talked about iconic roles. I was blessed to play Troy Maxson in Fences, and it was monumental. It's a beast. It like almost killed me, and I almost, certainly probably cost the director a few dying moments as well. But it was a great role. When I read that play, I was like, how did August Wilson sit in our living room and write down this play about my family like that, because I identified with it so closely. My dad had been a professional boxer at a time when those guys didn't make a lot of money, blah, blah, blah. Unfortunately, his career was ended because of injury. You know, things
As often happens.
As often happens. And my brother, my oldest brother, who's deceased now, was a jock. He wanted to be a jock so bad. And my dad was so hard on him, you know, and none of us could really understand it. My dad had actually forfeited a boxing scholarship at Xavier in New Orleans. Okay. Back in the day, you know, boxing and football were the two college sports.
Yeah.
And my dad had a full ride. World War II broke out, and he and his whole boxing team decided to enlist in the service as a unit because they thought that it would give them a better opportunity to get where they wanted to go. So he never went back to college after 2 years. And so he always felt like, you guys, education is your priority. All the athletic stuff, all that, no. If you want to do that, fine, but you got to do this, that, and the other. So he and my dad struggled like Corey and Troy did, you know, and they fought. And I mean, they fought like cats and dogs, you know. I mean, some really bad stuff happened over the years, you know. And when I read that play, I was like, whew. Now I understand my old man a little bit better. I certainly understand what my brother was going through, you know, the whole thing. And so that play, again, was one where, although the circumstances weren't exactly the same, I could identify with that whole situation. And I loved doing it. I was so blessed. David Wilbur, who was then one of the artistic directors at Performance Network, actually came to me and said, hey, we want to work with you. What play do you want to do? And we both had the same play in mind.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So
it's a great play.
It's a great play.
Great play.
Yeah. So that one was the one that, another one, I'm putting that like right up in the top of the thing.
Those roles don't come along very often.
You know, one of the most unusual things that I did in my career, you know, we were talking before we started rolling about Barton Bunn, who's a great friend of mine, and it was the artistic director at Blackbird Theater. So he and his then wife had gone to Stratford to see Cat on the Hot Tin Roof. And when they came back, they said, we want to do the show, and we want you to play Big Daddy. And it just kind of went from there. It ended up being a pretty much all-black version of that play, which they didn't care at the time. It was like, you're gonna be Big Daddy, and we'll, you know, figure out the rest.
Yeah, and then years later they did it on Broadway with an all-black cast.
Yeah, with an all-black cast. Yeah, James Earl Jones. So it was kind of interesting. But I did that, and again, you know, we looked at it. You know, we talked about what we needed to do. We decided not to change any of the words, you know, that type of thing, to try and modify Tennessee Williams's great work in any aspect. And I got to work with, you know, two young, up-and-coming, you know, fantastic young African-American actors that played Brick and Maggie. You know, and we did it at the Blackbird in that, you know, little funky creative center space, upstairs, not downstairs where you guys did the Shakespeare thing.
Okay.
And it was great. It was great, you know. And I felt blessed that I got to play one of these iconic roles. And I can remember one of the critics saying, hey, you know, some people might have an issue with this, but it's all acting, it's all pretend. None of these people that we ever seen do any of these roles are real. So I had no problem with it. You know,
did other people have it?
Not really. You know,
what were your fears about it?
Well, just basically, again, you know, that play was obviously written for a Southern white patriarch, you know, that kind of thing. And we all know that that Tennessee Williams was really into that family thing and the angst that he felt growing up in it and that kind of thing. So, again, it was kind of like, okay, but we're going to do it. We're going to do it well. You know, we're going to live faithfully to the script, you know, that kind of thing. And when I got into it, it's like, you know, Tennessee, the words are just magnificent. You know, I mean, I'm like, wow, you know, this guy has got a lot to say. Maggie and Brick had a lot to say. You know, Big Mama, we had a fine cast and we had a good time with it. So I was really, really appreciative of that opportunity to do something a little different. Doesn't happen a lot around here. You know, the Detroit Rep, where I'm a company member, has a reputation for doing diversity and colorblind. They don't like to use that word anymore. I'm sorry, Leah.
Color conscious casting?
Well, basically, what they've always felt, their philosophy has been, look, we represent Detroit, we represent the best of Detroit, which means to them diversity. You know, so whoever's the best actor for the role, if the play's not race specific, then this is how we're gonna roll. You know, we can have mixed couples, we can have, anything up there, and they live to that. Whereas I've always felt that, other companies are really hesitant to do that. We don't see much flipping of the switch here, as the kids say, in terms of iconic roles. We don't see, and that's kind of frustrating as an actor. I can remember, going to auditions and going, well, boy, I could really do that role. I could really sink my teeth into it, but it wasn't written for an African American, and I don't really know if the artistic director has the consciousness to go there, to go ahead and do it that way. Now, again, there's always the danger of making a play something that it isn't. We have a lot of controversy in the world about, about casting, Mamet and others, and I remember the big thing about the African woman, the playwright down, somebody in Ohio was going to do her show and play Martin Luther King with a white guy.
Oh yeah,
because they
or there's the Virginia Woolf controversy as well.
Yeah, with would all be his kind of control freak thing over casting and that kind of thing. So I mean, I get it. I think I would have issues if someone said, okay, we're going to do an all white version of
Raisin in the Sun,
or Fences,
yeah.
That kind of thing. But then at the same time, there are different plays that tell stories of different ethnic groups. I had the pleasure of directing A View from the Bridge, which I really thought it got into the whole thing of the Italian immigrant and what they faced, the prejudice and the pressures and the type of life that they had to live to get where they were trying to better their families and that kind of thing. So it's all over there. But obviously, as a working actor, you want to work. You want to do stuff and.
Yeah, and it's a shame to be, discounted before you even get to be in front of the director.
Right.
And I mean, that happens to every actor. There's roles for men that women would like to audition for, and it's my belief, and I want to get your thoughts on this, is that it's all about the director's vision, and the director has to justify his choices in some way.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you wanted to do an all-white Raisin in the Sun, well, okay, but you better be able to justify that, and you're going to have to take the heat for it.
Yeah, because and that's the thing is that, particularly in this world that we live in now with social media and stuff like that, almost anything you do gets magnified, to a degree that, and people are really kind of like, well, wait a minute, why would you do that, so on and so forth, and it's I think that what happens is that we need to encourage people of color to write the stories,
yes,
that type of thing. We just do obviously the same thing with women, anybody, to write these stories. I think that one of the things that we're seeing now, and I don't know if you've seen it as well, but almost all the newer scripts that you start seeing, they incorporate some aspect of diversity. The community is more diverse that they're talking about. It's just not, the neighbors or the friends or the uncle or aunt or whoever it might be of a different ethnicity or whatever, that kind of thing. And we can talk about, then we can have discussion, through the course of the dialogue of the play and the plot of the play about these issues that we face, when we're looking at each other and going, well, okay, am I afraid of this guy? Or, can my prejudice come out? Can we talk about that? Can we talk about the fact that I'm uncomfortable with, being around this person or that person? So I'm glad to see that. I think that, there was this, the debate. I know August Wilson got embroiled in a lot of stuff when he came out and said with no uncertainty that I would like to see my work, directed by African Americans, produced by, I like to see African, and I think that that's what he was saying, and a lot of that got distorted, in terms of, he said that only a white person should direct his show, that kind of thing. And
or only a black person.
I'm sorry, that's what I meant.
Yeah.
And I think that he became adamant about that. He's like, I created this work because there was no work for people who are qualified to do it. You guys aren't giving them a shot at directing Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf.
Right.
So let him direct Fences. And I think that's a reasonable argument. Now, of course, since he's died, and his estate has felt differently about that, and we've seen some fine productions that white directors have done of some of August Wilson's plays. I'm not always sure if a person, like you said, if a director not only has to have vision, they also have to have some understanding of what they're looking at, that kind of thing. And I've taken this controversial point at sometimes. I felt comfortable directing The View from the Bridge. And the reason I did was because the fact of being a person of color in this country means that, by definition, I'm forced to learn about your culture and what goes on and what happens, that type of thing. I'm not so sure that white directors really have a nuanced understanding of African American culture, that type of thing. Are there things that when you're looking at the script or when you're looking at what choices that actors make that you truly understand, and can you translate that? Now, of course, that would go back and forth both ways, I think. So I think that the issue is that how comfortable are you in terms of doing your work, as a director or as a producer, and how comfortable are you in saying, hey, they're talking about playing this card game in this play, and what is that? I always told I was having this discussion with a former artistic director. I know how to play bridge and bid whist. Do you know how to play bid? Huh? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean.
Okay.
That I have some understanding of the larger culture as well as my own subculture. And I don't know if of course, our education system is so weak in that aspect, that I don't know if things get translated or not the way they should. So I'm a big believer that there is room for African American theater, that it should be done.
Especially in Detroit.
Yeah, and that's a dearth, man. It's like heartbreaking to not see, to have people, young actors that have never seen a professional production of an August Wilson play, because it's not happening. It's not happening right now.
Why do you think that is?
Well, a lot of things. I think that it's tough. In every theater that's out here, with maybe a couple of exceptions, is struggling financially. That's just the way it is. You're trying to put butts in the seats. We are in this cyclical economy, particularly here in Michigan. When things are good, people come out. When they're not, they don't. So it's hard to sustain. It's hard to get audiences to say, hey, I want to go see that play. Everybody wants to go see Hamilton, right? Because it was the thing. It was the Broadway musical and blah, blah. And that's kind of how America is. So Hamilton was torn, and for weeks and weeks, that's all you heard about was Hamilton coming to Detroit. Well, this fall, Ruben Santiago Hudson had a traveling production of one of August Wilson's plays, Jitney.
Oh.
That came. Yeah, and I went. Somehow or another, I thought I wasn't going to be able to go, and the dates opened up and the tickets opened up, and I was able to go see the show. And I was disappointed that Orchestra Hall wasn't jam-packed, that it wasn't just full of people. And I was disappointed that it wasn't full of younger people as well. And what is that? Well, certainly they didn't have the advertising budget that a Hamilton does. They didn't have the cachet that
everybody was talking about Hamilton for years and years.
For years and years and years, and you get that Broadway machine going, man. They know how to sell shows, no doubt about it, and it was a fine production, that kind of thing. I think that one of the things that we see here, you talk about Michigan, things haven't changed. We have very talented people coming out of our state. If you just look at who's who in Hollywood and all that now, I mean, it's just, they're right at the top. You can name names of people that did work with you and I, right on these little stages around here. But what that means is that we have homegrown talent that, like every place else, they end up going to the East Coast and to the West Coast, because that's where the money is. That's where the regularity of the work is, that type of thing. So we have a difficult time keeping our own, here. And I think that one of the other things too is that, and I think this is true in general. I don't know. You've been in Louisiana. I've never worked any place else in terms of production and stuff like that. I think that the nonprofit theater model has a bit of a fault in itself, just in the way it's structured. We're asking people to give us money, donations, grants, things like that, and it's never enough to sustain, where you want to go. We haven't been able to find a way to fund what it is we do, in a sustainable way. Now, I'm sure the same thing happens with the off Broadway shows in New York.
Well, we are off Broadway.
And those guys are really having a hard time finding. But the producers are going to come in and say, "Hey, you know what? I can get Jeff Daniels, I can get Alan Sorkin. We can do a play in New York, and we can put up a couple $1 million, and we'll make millions. That type of thing." So, by us not doing our work to generate a commercial return. We're not trying to give investors a return on their money, that kind of thing, that we kind of come up with, oh gosh, I want to do African American theater in Detroit. Where am I doing it?
Well, I mean,
is there a building?
When I think I want to do African American theater in Detroit, I would, and please correct me, but I'm thinking, well, you couldn't pick a better place to do African American theater. It's Detroit, for crying out loud. We have a very large African American community, we have a relatively affluent African American community, who can support theater, but they don't, or they don't come, or what's going on?
When I was working with Plowshares, which is getting ready to do a show, thank God.
Oh, good.
I just saw something on Facebook. I think they open next weekend. I think that one of the things that I saw was that people came out. People came out and they saw the shows. I think it was difficult though to kind of get when we talk about the relative affluence of Detroit. Here's what we have in Detroit, and I did a lot of work with nonprofits and the healthcare stuff. I did a lot of outside stuff. In terms of what's going on. These pockets that are there, these affluent people, everybody's coming to them. Everybody, every charity, every nonprofit that's out there. There's only so much that you can do, with that type of thing. And I think that if we had ever had like that individual that was like super crazy about theater, that would endow a theater company, that could have happened. But for whatever reasons, it hasn't happened. But I think that one of the things is that when you build your audience, we look at the demographics of the theater going audience, and it is a relatively affluent population. There are people that have disposable income, so on and so forth. If you really do break down the economic structure of people in Detroit, it is there are a lot of people that are African American in Detroit that just don't have the resources. They don't have the money, to do something.
How do we reach them?
Yeah, and that's kind of weird. I mean, we look at I look at the model that they do at the Detroit Rep, and now it's in transition there in terms of leadership, and Leah Smith is doing her thing, and I was like to Leah, a couple of years ago, and I was like, Leah, the Rep's been charging $17 a ticket for like 25 years, got up to ticket prices, and she says, no way, can't do that. I got to find a way to bring in money to offset that. We're trying to keep our ticket prices low so that it's accessible to people that don't have a lot of money. They're charging $17. That's like half of what most equity theaters in this area are charging for admission.
Less than half in a lot of cases. Purple Rose ticket is going to cost you $60.
Yeah, and so it's.
I think. I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that.
It's not. It's not 17. It's not $17.
No.
Right. That kind of thing. And so I think that's one of the things is like so you're doing this theater thing, you got to pay. You want to do the union thing, you got to pay benefits, you got to do this, you got to hire stage managers, you got to do so on and so forth. You got to meet all these obligations, you got to pay rent on a building that you can't use for anything else when you're doing a show. The whole single purposeness of a theater. So it's very hard. I'm so grateful that Gary Anderson, who runs Plowshares, is still doing what he's doing, and that at some point maybe he can make that thing tip over, to where it's like, okay, hey, it's rolling. We recognize the value of this thing. Let's empower him to do what he needs to do and build this thing. What I was mentioning again, the young people leaving. I also believe that there's room for more than one African American theater company,
Okay.
obviously, and I would like to see
And not just in Detroit,
Right.
like out in the
Yeah.
out in the suburbs.
out in the suburbs. Can
Yeah.
we get a group of young people that are inspired to say, hey, you know what, we're going to do that. You know, Emilio Rodriguez is doing Black and Brown. You know, and they're doing stuff, and I don't know how many years it's been now, but it's growing. You know, it's not. You know, they're doing what they do. You know, that kind of thing. So again, it's the fact that you know, some of the newer companies that are out here in like Tipping Point and the Detroit Public that are downtown, that kind of thing, they were able to tap into a community that have way more resources, you know, and get it going. And I'm sure that for them, they're still like, okay, we got to juggle this. We got to figure out how to make this work, because we're still talking, you know, 100 seats, 150 seats. How much revenue can you
And
actually
an equity
generate?
actor is going to cost them $5,000.
Yeah,
I
to
mean,
do a
period,
show.
to do a show.
Yeah.
So each equity actor is going to cost you a certain. So you wonder why how $17.50
Right.
can
Right.
sustain a theater,
Yeah.
or why why more theaters don't go just for profit, because
Right.
they are reliant on those kind of grants in order
Right.
to sustain themselves.
Right, and that, you know, and doing, you know, for-profit shows, man, it's hit or miss. You know, you hit big, and then, you know, we see shows closing on Broadway all the time. It's
Yeah.
just, you know, whatever appeals to the public, you know, that kind of thing. All those things have to kind of line up. So it's a tough business. Now, I'll say this, and I go back and forth with people on some of the stuff that they talk about. When I look around Detroit, the one thing that has changed since you said things hadn't changed much, there are a lot more theater companies out here. There are a lot more people doing theater in a way that didn't exist. You
And
know,
that can only be good news,
Right.
You know, and quite frankly, there is room for even more.
Right.
I think we could quadruple it, even quintuple it easily, and still be able to sustain. Because my feeling is that theater brings theater. Like
Right.
the more theater goers
the more-
the more theater goers become, because the people are like, hey, you should see
Right.
this play, and
Right.
pretty soon people are making it a part of their, you know, monthly routine.
Right,
Or,
it's something that they can do,
Yeah.
and it's affordable. You know, bottom line, you know, when we look at whatever entertainment is, you know, what I think we need is that we need like an Illich or Gilbert or somebody to just get hungry,
Get smart.
and just
Yeah.
like say, hey, you know what? Yeah, I was disappointed. Even like when they did the casino thing, I'm thinking, oh, okay, they're gonna have like, are they gonna do shows like they do in Vegas?
Yeah.
and it really, they found that they don't need to. You know.
People are going to come because they don't have any competition.
Right, and yeah, they don't. And people are kind of like, yeah, they don't need that that high entertainment thing going on there. You know, so they do concerts. You know, at a couple of the places, and that's pretty much it. You know, but it's what I do see. You know, back in I don't know if you knew this or not. Carleton, going back to Carleton, I never had any theater education. So in 2014, to quit my job, I went to Wayne State.
Did you get your?
I did not.
degree? No,
I did
just-
not.
But you studied?
Because of the financial aid thing, you can't get another bachelor's, right?
Right.
And I didn't want to do the Hillberry thing. I took some classes. They let me do a post-bachelor kind of a program. So I stayed there for a year. I took 9, you know, kind of basic classes there. And what I was able, here I'm, you know, almost 60 then. And I'm in this class with these 18-year-olds. You know, some of them in their first college class, that kind of thing. And I'm looking, I'm like seeing these kids that are still crazy about theater, you know, and
We have so many of them,
right,
and then we churn them out, and then they go to the far ends of the earth, and they don't stay in state.
right, and I think that's the sustainability thing, you know. Again, is how do we keep them here? But some of them have, you know. I've had some kids that I work with that I'm like, I can think of one person in particular that I directed. Right on the verge of them completing their undergrad stuff. Maybe they were done. But I'm like, you know what? You got the look, you got the ability. You need to go to California and like get rich, you know. Then come back and take care of us. But she chose to stay here to do the work that she was committed to doing.
Yeah.
You know, and I know it's difficult and that kind of thing, but I'm like, oh my God, that person. But they're talented. There's some people that have that resolve. Another young lady that was here decided to move up north, man, up to the UP, and started a theater company up there. and it's been like 4 or 5 years now for Jamie Weeder and her stuff up there. Yeah,
and she seems to be making it work.
Yeah, and she's an amazingly talented young lady. You know, and she's making it work up there, and she's putting a lot into it. You know, that kind of thing. So yeah, there's some people that are going to keep it going.
What advice would you give a young actor just graduating from Wayne or from Oakland or anywhere, if they wanted to stay in town? What would you advise them?
Well, the first thing I would tell them is it's tough. You know, it is. But the thing that worked for me is showing up. You know, go to the auditions. You know, do your homework. Be prepared. Do the job. That type of thing. Form the relationships. One of the things that I was blessed with was that when I started doing theater, I didn't know anybody in the theater community. I hadn't gotten any advice. I was told I wasn't aware of the fact that they never cast black actors at the Purple Rose. You know, that kind of thing. That was the fact. So I went out there and auditioned. You know what I mean?
And they cast you.
Well, eventually, yeah. You know, but go explore. You know, find these opportunities. Show up. You know, that kind of thing. Show people what you can do. You know, show them that. You know, I think you have to be professional. I think that you have to show a level of maturity. You know, where that trust kind of can develop. Be passionate about what you do. Understand that this is a business rejection. You know, that it is. And if you can find a way to keep yourself financially stable, you know, doing whatever it is you need to do, that gives you the flexibility to go out and search and explore and kind of find your path. That's what I would encourage them to do. I would encourage them to look at the examples of people that are here in this community that have sustained. You know, talk to them. You know, why?
Well, you're one of them.
Yeah. Why are you here? You know, why haven't you done this? Why haven't you done that?
Why haven't you left?
Well, first of all, I had no idea that it was going to end up like this. If I had known what I know now. Secondly, I told you one of the exciting incident for me to get into the theater was that I was going through a divorce. I had 2 small children, and I had a son that was very young at the time, and I did not want to lose that. You know, I did not want to lose that connection. I was fortunate that I had been a very amicable divorce, that I was allowed to be a part of my children's life on a regular basis, and that was really important to me. It was important to me to be there for my son, that kind of thing. I had uprooted already to come to Michigan. My nuclear family is in Chicago, and my mother was, you know, she was getting older. I didn't want to be hundreds and hundreds of miles away from her. She was in Chicago, so that was, you know, that's a half a day's drive, you know, or an hour in a plane if I had to, you know, and I've had to, you know, at different times. So I felt like that my roots were here, and like I said, the first 20 years, man, I was working in corporate America. I had 6-figure jobs, you know, I had all the stability I wanted, and somehow or another, in a couple of years after starting doing this, I was an equity actor. So I had accomplished what I felt I wanted to accomplish, you know, that type of thing. I've done a lot of movies, you know, relatively a lot, I guess, you know, but I never had that feeling that I want to be a star, you know, that I want to be, you know, on the lead man in you know, in a Tyler Perry movie or any of that. I never felt that desire. I took it one day at a time, you know, that, okay, let's see what happens if I go to this audition and so on and so forth, you know, that kind of thing. So I felt like I had a very rewarding career here, that I had the best of the world that I could have, that I could spend time with my children. You know, we were able to, you know, educate them. You know, they're both doing well. You know, trying. You know, they're getting off their feet. My baby is almost 30 years old.
Yeah, wow.
You know, yeah, it's like a wow moment, and he just got married.
It's weird how that happened.
Yeah,
right? You're like, oh, how'd you turn 30?
Yeah. So here we go again. You know, so you never know what's going to happen, right? So my son meets this woman, he falls in love, they decide to get married, and just like that, they have a kid. So now I have a granddaughter that lives, you know, like 8 miles from me. 2 days a week, at least 2 days a week, I provide childcare for her. How many grandfathers get to do that?
Well, I think so often actors think it's an either-or situation where it's either I get to have a family or I get to have a career.
Right.
And I think if you stay in your relative communities, in your Detroits, in your Minneapolises, in your Atlantas, you can have everything. You can
Right.
have the family and the satisfying relationships and have a career.
Right. Right. And again, I remember a student asking me, well, when do you think you'll make it? And I'm like, define making it.
Yeah.
I created some wonderful moments in my life, and some people shared to me that they shared those moments with me, that kind of thing. I see myself now, hey, I don't have much, 63, it's at some point it's done, I won't be able to memorize lines or whatever it might be. I don't know whatever that end will be. But I'm in a position now to where, unfortunately, for the last 3 years, I've been part of the Detroit Actors Workshop, where we're training people. We're working with folks that have bucket list dreams of doing acting or whatever they want to do. And I was able to put together a staff. I was able to give some people some work to unveil their gifts and their talent, for carrying it on. And what I'm trying to do now is I'm trying to stay as stable as I can, keep working, do my thing, and be here for that up-and-coming actor that wants to talk about this stuff, that wants to kind of learn and grow. I got a handful of folks that I keep my hands on, that I think are superbly talented. I would like to see some of them get an opportunity to direct, if they so desire, that kind of thing, to get out in this community and become, because I just kind of like, wow, I looked at people like Council Cargo and some others, Herman McCain and Sandra Love Aldridge and Harold Hogan, who have been here for years, Tony Lucas, that are, been here for years doing this thing, and Madeline Porter just got a Kresge Fellowship, she and I are great friends, we were partners at Greenfield Village, that kind of thing, and I'm like, okay, that next generation, I see them coming. I see them coming. I see the Will Brysons and the Dan Johnsons. Miss Edmondson. She's out at the Purple Rose now doing the show, and Cassandra Freeman and others. That have the same passion and thirst, and they're immensely talented. They know a lot more than I ever knew at their age. About what they're doing. And I see most of them in a situation where, man, they're not going anywhere.
That's great.
And they'll be here.
Please
and I want to be there. Yeah, please do. Please do. And the other thing too, man, is that this is I went to Chicago maybe like 18 months, 2 years ago, to see the work of a young lady from here. One of our Mosaic people, she was on our stage at the Detroit Rep, and we just I was giving her a ride home when she was doing her show, and we got to be really good friends. And I wanted to go and see her doing her thing. She was in Chicago, and she's done well. She's been nominated, Jeff nominated, and all that. And I went to see this show, and quite frankly, and of course I'm prejudiced, I thought she stood out, in terms of this, holding her own in this professional arena in Chicago. And it was a little small theater, that kind of thing. And it was like, hey, I kind of own that, that's part of me, that's here. And if it's nothing more than that person coming up to me saying, hey, you know what, I'm gonna move to Chicago, and me saying, hey man, go do it, just do it, yeah, just encouraging and letting them know, we can look at all of the barriers. We can look at the fact that it's very difficult for us to see a company produce an African American play. That's one of the things that, man, if I had a wish, is that I could get every equity theater out here to produce a play that was written by an African American, and see what happens with their audience. Because everybody's like, oh my God, my audience, I don't know, that kind of thing. Like, they go and see them on Broadway, that kind of thing. Maybe that'll happen, and maybe these kids will have an opportunity to go, hey, I can sink my teeth in that. I can really show.
That could be me.
Yeah, that could be, and that kind of thing. So, like you said, things haven't changed a lot, but they are evolving. And that's probably, we all want things to revolve. We want it to go fast. We want that 24-hour cycle. Well, maybe it'll take some time. Maybe it'll take another generation or two.
Oh gosh, I can't wait that long.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, you can. Yeah. We'll be sitting back one day. Look, dude, I tell these kids, sometimes it can happen so fast. I look now, I was seeing something the other day where they were doing something with Keegan Michael Key and Jordan Peele. And I don't know if it was like I think it was like not like a flashback type thing. It was maybe, I think they're running some of their shows again on a streaming service or whatever. And I can remember the very first major film that I ever did that didn't ever get released. Keegan blended the lead. He was just out of grad school. I didn't know him at the time. And then that next year, we ended up doing a couple plays together, and we spent, how it is, like almost a year together, that kind of thing. And then being there when he was like, hey man, I'm thinking about auditioning at Second City, just to see, you know what I mean? And then seeing where that took him, and I'm like, yeah, that's a rare thing. But then I look at the other people that were involved in that, the 313, that, Larry Joe Campbell, Sherry Van Hoovel, all these folks that, Kiefer and all that were Detroit people, Naima, they were in it, now they're like doing their thing. It might not be at the same level and the same level of notoriety, but they're working.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
As long as you're getting work.
Yeah, and they started here. The very same people that mentored me, mentored them and gave them a basis. And like we said, hey, 20% of them, 50% of them, whatever the percentage is, they go out and do the thing. Some of them stay here. Those guys started the Planet Ant. They literally, that thing was a nasty little coffee house in Hamtramck. That I would, like, when I first went there, I was like, ooh, I don't want to touch anything. And now, 20-something years later, they're still doing theater. And they're expanding and that kind of thing. And that's because some kids were like, you know what? Shoot. There's the Rap, there's U.D. Mercy Theater Company, there's Meadowbrook. That's all we got. That's all we had. And they said, okay, we're going to do the Planet Ant. Now we got Open Book, and we got something Monster Box, and we got Tipping Point, Chicago, the Detroit Public. It's just, we got Ringwald. The guys you went to school with. It just these visions that people start having, and you look up and you go, wow, stuff been around for a minute. They tried. They said we were dead when they started rolling out Celluloid, right? Back in 1919 or whatever it was.
To be in theater is to be in a dying industry for the last 6,000 years.
Yes, it has.
So they've been saying it for 6,000. Thesmus was like, I better work on my resume.
I might have to move to Rome or something.
Well, believe it or not, we are at an hour.
Wow.
I told you, it just goes by like that. I want to thank Lynch Travis for spending this time with me. This was an amazing interview. I hope that you come back at some point. It was just a real pleasure to talk with you. If you are interested in learning more about me and what I do, my website is www.michiganchekhov, that's CHEKHOV.com, or www.jefftamakis.com. Don't forget to like me on Facebook and on YouTube. And my next guest will be Diane Hill.
Oh,
so
cool.
Really looking forward to that. And Lynch, thanks again.
Well, thank you for having me, that kind of thing. And I wish I could spot off my website, but it's in development. I should find out some more about that today. Yeah.
All right.
All right.
Well, we'll make sure. And we'll see you guys later.